This bulletin proudly brought to you in association with Alex Campbell's Menswear.
Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to the South today. I'm Daryl Baser. New Zealand is more than halfway through the COVID-19 lockdown, with sad news today on the growing number of casualties shortly in the bulletin. Things are changing for New Zealand as this global pandemic continues to spread, and the South today isn't immune to the issues facing the nation, as we all band together to stop the spread of COVID-19. We at Allied Press thank you for your viewership and understanding at this time, as New Zealand joins the rest of the world in doing everything possible to reduce the impacts of the virus. Director-General of Health Ashley Bloomfield's briefing today gave some grim news, with 4 more people losing their lives to COVID-19 during the last 24 hours. He says 3 are from Christchurch's Rosewood Rest Home and the 4th is a Wellington man. At today's media briefing, Director-General of Health Ashley Bloomfield says 4 people have died due to COVID-19 in New Zealand over the past 24 hours. The deaths are 2 men in their 90s and 1 in his 80s at Burwood Hospital in Christchurch, and a Wellington man in his 70s.
We've previously signalled the underlying vulnerabilities of the Rosewood residents and that this group would continue to be at risk. That does not make today's news any less sad. This is the largest number of deaths we have reported on any day in New Zealand from COVID-19, and it is a sobering reminder of what is at stake here. I do want to acknowledge the families associated with these people who have passed and offer my sympathy and those I think of all New Zealanders and our support.
Dr Bloomfield says there are now more than 1,300 cases in New Zealand, with 15 people in hospital, including a person in Dunedin who's in a critical condition. There are 17 new cases of COVID-19 nationwide over the past day, made up of 18 confirmed cases and 9 probable ones.
48% of cases involve contact with a confirmed case in New Zealand, including those in our clusters, while 39% have a link with overseas travel. Those that can be ascribed to community transmission is still just at 2%.
However, the news isn't all bad, as more than 620 people have recovered from COVID-19, an increase of 82 on the previous day. In Dunedin, the South today. Ahead of the country going into lockdown, agencies warned of a potential spike in the number of family harm incidents as families stay in small bubbles. One of the agencies working to combat family harm is the White Ribbon Trust, and campaign manager Rob McCann joins me now. Ahead of the country going into lockdown, social services agencies warned of a potential spike in domestic violence or family harm incidents. One of the agencies trying to combat these is White Ribbon Trust, and we sat down with the Trust's campaign manager, Rob McCann. Unfortunately, we've seen a rise in the first 2 weeks of stats of family harm incidents. Can you outline what White Ribbon's role is in relation to these sort of incidents?
Well, we're not a service that is required to operate in a public manner. So one of the things we had to do was make sure we step back and let those services like Women's Refuge and Shine get their key messages out about keeping people safe. But now that we're into the next part of the lockdown, we want to make sure that we send out some proactive messages to both men and women about how that they can make sure that our homes are safe places and that domestic violence doesn't increase. And we know it is going to increase because there are things that are normal stresses that help to create an environment where people make bad decisions and choices. Like Christmas is one of those when you've got extra stresses on the budget, lots of people coming around to your household, we see family stats rise. And in a lockdown like this, which is unprecedented, people are going to be trapped literally in their own homes. And they need to work out how to be respectful to one another and how to be able to cope in such a situation. So we see our role as being able to provide just that little bit of support and those ideas about how to make sure that homes are a safe place for everyone.
So I understand there's a campaign being launched pretty much today by White Ribbon.
Yeah, we're trying very hard to launch today. It might be tomorrow morning, so you might be getting a bit of an exclusive here. And it's an online campaign because obviously it can't be face-to-face and person-to-person. And we're just sending out some very, very, very simple graphics and messages from some of our ambassadors in getting some key talking points that are positive, proactive, and that help prevent violence in the first place.
Excellent. And here, so it is, we are in an online environment. So what are the channels and vehicles White Ribbon is going to be using to communicate these messages?
Yes, so one of our key channels that we'll use will be Facebook and Instagram. And we as an organisation have just a few workers, and then we have lots of volunteers, 200 ambassadors, hundreds of White Ribbon riders, hundreds and actually thousands of volunteers and supporters around the country. So what we'll be doing is sending out an email which has all of these resources to those people, and then we hope that they will spread the key messages and the graphics to their friends and their families and their workplaces, and that's how this campaign will effectively operate, a grassroots campaign being spread by people who are proactive in the area of preventing violence.
What can the general public do to help?
It's really, really simple, actually. Just read the campaign messages, have a wee think and go, yeah, that's right. These are the things that we can do. And some of the messages are very, very simple, and they're just common sense. If you're getting stressed at home and you're finding things a little bit difficult, go for a walk. As human beings and living in confined spaces, sometimes we don't agree and we can get really, really cross. And sometimes we don't think straight. So that's a great time to go out and get a little bit of exercise. Or give your partner some time so that he or she can connect with their friends on Facebook or using Zoom or whatever technology you have. There are great ways of keeping connected to our communities without actually physically having to be there. And we're all discovering that. But we need to make sure that people can be respectful in their homes and work out how to stay safe, how to keep calm, and how to deal with what can be a pretty stressful environment.
And with the, as you mentioned at the start, agencies that are around, what words of advice would you have for anyone who's actually in a family harm situation where it's reaching boiling point? Where should they go from there?
They need to contact those essential services like Women's Refuge or Shine. And they both have 0800 numbers or free numbers that you can contact and get support immediately. Those workers are designated essential so they can come and support you at the time. But remember, if your life is in danger or you feel threatened in such a way that you think physical harm is going to occur, call the police. They are our first call to make sure that people stay safe. We don't operate at that level. We're a prevention campaign, so we're about trying to send messages before you get to that point. But luckily for us in New Zealand, we've got a tremendous amount of agencies that are all operating and working very hard during this trying time.
Rob, thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate that. With the country in COVID-19 lockdown, the roads have become largely devoid of cars. The empty roads are making truck drivers' jobs easier as they continue to deliver essential supplies across New Zealand.
With the country in lockdown, foodstuffs delivery drivers have seen a massive change in road traffic as they continue to deliver groceries across the south.
Even myself coming from Green Island, there's no one on the road, and we have had reports of the TSI drivers that drive through the night, drove from Christchurch to Dunedin and only encountered a single car. It's very quiet between the main centres, but when you get back into the metropolitan areas, they are finding it a lot easier to get the trucks around.
And what it means for the road is we're getting to our delivery points a lot quicker than, because there's a lot less traffic, there's a bit more in terms of parking and not having to wait for, trying to get out of supermarkets, we're not having to wait for a lot of traffic to clear before we can get out.
Oh, it's been a huge effect. There's just no one around, even just to get around the town is so easy, and it's just nothing there. Just the odd car here and there, cyclists, and people out walking.
Foodstuffs says despite the extra shopping that occurred before New Zealand's lockdown, the huge warehouses such as this one in Dunedin were never going to run out of stock. and the staff worked extra hours to quickly restock supermarkets across the country.
So when the government announced we were going from level 3 to level 4 within a 48-hour period, the volumes did increase, and the staff here really stepped up to the challenge and lived by the Foodstuffs motto of feeding the South. We had no trouble getting extra shifts, extra staff, just put their hand up to do the extra and took pride in their work.
I'm quite a busy person. I like to be busy, and knowing that I could still come to work and not be at home. And my partner's she's struggling with not having to do much at home at the moment. She has the kids, but definitely I'm grateful that I have a job, somewhere to go, keeps me busy.
And the drivers say they do appreciate the kindness being shown on New Zealand roads.
I know people tend to wave every now and then, so never used to get that, but hopefully we could carry that on. To everyone out there, it's we're all in this together, so why not make it a positive rather than a negative?
In Dunedin, the South Today.
Governments across the globe are going into debt to support their economies as many businesses are closed due to nationwide lockdowns. An Australian academic says the public shouldn't be too worried about governments borrowing to keep economies afloat.
Kia ora, I'm Bruce Munro, and with me via video link is economist Professor Bill Mitchell. Professor Mitchell is from the University of Newcastle in Australia. He's a proponent of the increasingly popular modern monetary theory of economics, and he has a take on government debt that you don't often hear. Welcome, Professor Mitchell.
Thanks for having me.
The New Zealand government is spending tens of billions of dollars on its response to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Does all of this government debt scare you?
Well, not the government debt doesn't scare me. The New Zealand government's going to be able to cope with that at any time it wants. It issues its own currency. The debt's in New Zealand dollars. And so the New Zealand government can always meet its own liabilities. What the debt will ultimately mean is that the government's done the job properly, hopefully, and saved your economy and saved people's livelihoods, businesses, and firms and people's incomes. That's what you should be focusing on.
So help us understand why you're saying that government debt doesn't matter. We know that if we as private individuals run up debt, we have to pay it back. What's the crucial difference between private debt and government debt?
The government has to pay its debt back too. It's contractually bound, but that's not a problem because it is the currency issuer. So if you want to be crude, it's got unlimited capacity in terms of issuing New Zealand dollars. Now that doesn't mean that it should go wild, but it means that it doesn't have a financial constraint. Whereas you and I as households and private citizens, we use the currency that the government issues. And so for us, we are what I call financially constrained. What does that mean in simple terms? It means that we have to go to work to earn an income like you and I are doing now. And if we might have some savings, we can spend out of savings. And if we want to spend more than our sources of income, then we have to borrow. And we have to pay that back by sacrificing future consumption now to pay it back. And so ultimately we can go broke because if we can't keep earning income to pay our liabilities back, then we default on our liabilities, we become bankrupt and insolvent. The national government in New Zealand can never reach that state because it issues the currency. And so it can always meet those liabilities. That's not the problem that the New Zealand government's got. It's got plenty of problems at the moment, but not that.
So why don't most economists and politicians talk like you're talking?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've got my views on that, of course. And what I argue is that the mainstream of my profession has created a fictional world. It teaches a fictional world to its students. And in the public discourse, we've been led to believe that there's this fictional world, that the government is like a household, and just like the household, you and I know that if we go crazy with our credit card, then we'll be in trouble a few months down the track. Whereas and so the mainstream economists want us to believe that our national governments that issue the currency, that experience of households is something that we can then relate to the way in which governments run their fiscal affairs, their budgets. But the point is that the government's nothing like us. So why do they pretend that it is? Well, because they've got ideological agendas. And a famous economist once said that if the public found out that the government really didn't have any financial constraints, it might put too much pressure on politicians to do popular things. And economists will tell you that imposing these artificial fiscal constraints on governments and talking as if the government's like a household creates a political climate where the politicians won't go crazy and start building statues of themselves and what have you, as you see in some nations that have got less rule of law and less discipline. What we want to do is not compound the medical crisis and reach a point when we've got a vaccine or the medical crisis is diminished and find that we've got an economy that's been destroyed. What we want to do is, when we've solved the medical crisis, have as many firms and workers ready to go and get back as fast as growth and back to normal as possible. That's what the New Zealand government should be prioritising. Any of these negative thoughts about future debt burdens and all of that, if we don't do that, if you don't keep your economy as intact as possible, well then the future generations are going to suffer much more from that, from their parents being jobless, from the rundown of infrastructure, from employment opportunities for kids leaving school. They'll all be diminished. That's the challenge.
Thank you, Professor Mitchell, and thank you for watching. Ka kite anō.
Time now for a look at the weather.
Tonight's weather proudly brought to you by Mole Map.
Beginning with the situation, well, the first cold southwesterly of the year has hit some parts with a vengeance, bringing snow to many hill areas around Otago. The cold snap is set to ease gradually this week, and expect an anticyclone bringing clear skies by day, but watch out for morning frosts. In the southern towns, the Catlins, Balclutha, Lumsden and Gore can all expect strong southwesterly winds and showers later. It's due to be 12 degrees for the Catlins, Lumsden and Gore and 13 in Balclutha. Heading over to the Central Lakes, Wanaka and Queenstown are both heading for moderate southwesterlies, mostly clear skies and 13 degrees. Alexandra is the same but warmer on 14, while Te Anau can expect strong southwesterlies with showers and just 11 degrees. In the northern towns, Timaru and Oamaru are due for moderate to fresh southwesterlies and cloud, 14 for Timaru and 12 in Oamaru. While inland, Twizel and Omarama are both in line for moderate southwesterlies, clear skies and 14 degrees. In Dunedin, it'll be cloudy tonight with strong cold southwest winds and an overnight low of 7 degrees. Cloudy and cold tomorrow with gusty southwesterlies easing slowly during the day. A high of 11 and a low of 8. Expect a few sunny periods on Thursday before cloud arrives with moderate to fresh southwest winds. A high of 13 and a low of 7 degrees. Cloudy with gusty southwesterlies tonight in Invercargill and a chilly low of 7 degrees. Cloudy and dry at first tomorrow, but showers develop during the afternoon with strong cold southwesterly winds. A high of 11 and a low of 7 degrees. Showers clearing on Thursday with a few sunny periods developing. It'll still be cold with strong gusty southwesterlies. Expect a high of 12 and a low of 7. And that's all from the South Today team for this Tuesday. For the latest news from the southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook and YouTube. And stay tuned to Channel 39 for the latest COVID-19 updates from the government. Stay calm during the pandemic, and as the Prime Minister says, be kind. Ka kite a popo. See you tomorrow.
This bulletin proudly brought to you in association with Alex Campbell's Menswear.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.